Hello and welcome. It's been 2 months since I've streamed this game. Yes, I felt guilty about it for those past 2 months. And I figured since I'm not really like a horror game person, so I'm never, I have never really ran into one that's clicked with me in any real way. Figured since, technically When They Cry series is labeled under horror. Not even technically, but is. Figured, just return to this because I started this in I want to say May. So it's been 5 months and I'm still not past episode 1, which I'm going to get past. Not hopefully this month. I'm actually guaranteeing it. Because it'll be some shit if I stopped and we were right at the end. In which case then I'll jump straight into chapter 2. But given how I've pretty much logged 16 hours in this is so far, I doubt we're close to done with this chapter. Also, hey Sosuke, welcome to Kenzo Murder Hour. This reminds me, I actually need to check the game volume because it's been a whole 2 months. Okay, no, I think the sound is good. Okay. Today was a day. What happened? Because honestly, today for me was weird because it took forever, but it was relatively average instead of just bad. Load. Damn, it's almost been 3 months. Yeah, if 13 more days and it'll have been 3 months. Jesus. 4:43 p.m. July 17th. Wait a minute. The last time I streamed this was on a Saturday in July. I was about to say, that's a weird time because I wouldn't be off of work by then. Yeah, and I think that was back when I was still working 5 days a week, too. So let me try and get rid of this. No. System. So let me minimize it. Okay, now it's not showing up in OBS. Great. SEO fans in my mentions, Laundromat was almost overrun by 2 people. People on the TL being mad the Type Lumina is exposing the machination and overall just being laundry. Yeah. I can speak for the Type Lumina thing. Hikey didn't say anything to Otter because I really felt like I only would have made it worse. Because I'm not good at consoling people. I can't even console myself. So, I feel like the best thing for me to do is just avoid that conversation with him specifically. But I remember the SAO conversation from last night on Discord. I remember that. I'm not even shocked the Laundromat could get overrun by 2 people and low energy. I was about to say, I didn't see any Sonic tweets on my timeline. It wasn't that low energy today for me. And then I realized, nah, that's not the only thing that makes my timeline low energy 90% of the time. time for reading again. Brain. Shit. I've consistently called her shit. I may have to be roughly honest with him, having literally been there multiple... Yeah. Because the entire time, like, when I got home and saw the tweet he put out, I genuinely sat there like, bro, you heard me have a bitch fit when I played Bayonetta. You heard me have a bitch fit when I was going back through DMC3 before I started to say again that I enjoyed that game and actually love it to death. And I just kind of sit there like, I understand what he's going through. And I don't want to shit on him for it, because I feel like that'll only make it worse. And how I came out last night during the Discord call just didn't feel like it actively helped. For me, it's just the thing of I don't really know how to handle people still. Like, yeah, I can carry a conversation. I just don't know how to handle, like, some people's emotions, or when they're highly emotional at all. Because I'm sitting there like, well, fuck. They was just bluffing me how to kill her in Dead by Daylight. Give up mid-match. They just slap one dude, and then all of a sudden... Alright, I'm done. I'm leaving. You cannot harm me. I am done. Just imagine someone just running up. Well, I've done my job. Tap them once. Deleting me. Just deletes one person. Alright, bye. Did you just log on to do that one thing? Yes. Oh. That's somehow the best and worst thing you could ever do to somebody. So, let me try to start reading so we can actually start making progress. Oh, yeah. Shannon entered the entrance hall to the mansion with a tottering gait. My brain just recognized I've never seen this word before. Hang on, hitting up the dictionary. Because I've never heard the word tottering either, but I can at least assume what that one means. I don't know what GAIT means. I'm gonna be real. Oh, it's style of walking. That is such a weird fucking word for a walk. Just a gait. Or is it supposed to be gait? I don't know. It's probably gait, and the more I think about it. A mixture as I almost read exhalation. Exaltation and uncertainty gave her a feeling that she couldn't easily describe. It swelled up in her chest until it felt like she was about to burst. After stopping for a second in front of the servant room to take a deep breath and calm her heart, she opened the door. Inside, Goda, who had been ordered to take the midnight shift at the mansion tonight, was absorbed in a worn-out crossword puzzle magazine. He looked up for an instant to see if one of the family had come, but when he realized it was a fellow servant, he returned to his puzzle as if nothing happened.
Ah, そうですか。それは助かります。そろそろ戸締まりの見回りに行きたかったのですが、ここを開けてもいいものか困っていたのです。何しろ旦那様方の会合はまだだいぶ続きそうですからね。いつ何時お茶のご用命があるかもわかりませんし。
そうですよね。
Bitch, he's so fucking Hi, Otter.
ではどうしましょうか。私が留守番を。
ではシャノンさん、申し訳ありませんがお屋敷内の見回りをお願いします。私はここで親族の皆さんのご用命の待機をしておりますので。
はい。
Shannon was slightly disgusted. Even though she'd come here to help out as a favor, she was casually being forced to do the job of the person actually on duty. Furthermore, after one-sidedly forcing that task on her, Goda returned to his magazine once again and became immersed in his crossword puzzle. Shannon bowed her head as a token sign of respect for her elder, and then left the room to patrol the mansion. Thanks to her being a bit ticked off, she managed to suppress that floaty feeling she'd been having until just now. And anyway, she couldn't let Genji or Kanon see her looking like this. She wanted a little time to herself until her heart calmed down, so maybe going on patrol wouldn't be so bad. She began to hear the tumultuous voice. I like how that's the word I read one take. Tumultuous. Not exhalation. Tumultuous. Voices of family discussion coming from the dining hall. Someone was speaking at great length, only to be interrupted by someone else. The second person also began to speak in a very long, drawn-out fashion, until yet another person interrupted. That kept on repeating. Oh, I did not think I accidentally clicked backlog. It was as though their displeasure was seeping out through their voices. She had been told to go to the guest house, so it would be bad if Kraus discovered her. Thinking this, Shannon dashed past the dining hall. Then she went along a prearranged route through the dark mansion, checking that all the locks were secure. She walked down the hall, checking each window. There were no humans on Rokenjima other than those connected to the family, so locking up didn't really serve much of a purpose. No one had been in the habit of locking up at the Ushiramiya head family, at least not until Natsui had scolded them for being careless. The metal fixture on the windows were ice cold, and as she checked them one by one, the glow in her heart seemed to cool down. Shannon, they sound like they hate each other. Not my pretty much. Just do I deal with no. It'll save everyone a headache. Oh shit. Things happening? Finally? At that time, she thought she saw something twinkling across the hall. Twinkling? How could anything be twinkling through the darkness of the hall? She figured she must have been imagining it, but she still held her breath. Grasping a curtain, she fearfully gazed down the hall. However, other than the occasional crack of thunder brightening the hallway, she was unable to glimpse any flicker again. It must have been her imagination after all. Maybe her heart was so agitated that she'd seen something that didn't even exist. Shannon went back to checking the windows. However, a certain unnerving memory was resurrected in the back of her mind. It was that ghost story, which had been passed down amongst the servants who served the Ushiramiya head family. The mansion had two different masters, one of the day and one of the night. Beatrice, master of the night, would sometimes fly around the mansion in the form of sparkling butterflies. That was the story. Come to think of it, didn't Kanon-kun once say he'd seen it with his own eyes? though he got sulky when I said he must have imagined it and refused to believe it. Could it possibly be true? The roar of thunder gave no answer. Beatrice just looks at Shannon and says, "Can you make a cheese for me?" Like, I had read it when it was initially typed. I had to stay silent for the music. The second day, October 5th, 1986. Genji tightened his bow tie and looked outside through a crack in the curtains. Great job. Through a crack in the curtains. Maybe the rain had died down a tiny bit since the previous night. But the thick rain clouds didn't seem like they'd be letting any trace of the morning sun get by. The morning was dim and far from refreshing. Thought you were gonna say clarinet.
お待たせしました、源氏様。
Kanon finished checking his appearance and exited the washroom. On their normal schedule, it was rare for anyone to have to suffer going straight from a midnight shift to an early morning shift. They were on a special schedule for the 2 days of the family conference. However, unless the typhoon passed today, the relatives' stay on this island would last until tomorrow. Kanon thought it best to be prepared for the special schedule to last an extra day. The two of them left the guest house, opening their umbrellas The rose garden had been devastated by the wind and rain on the previous night. Even though they had spent several days making it beautiful to welcome the guests, one stormy night was enough to ruin it. Kanon sighed. The two headed for the mansion. They were supposed to meet up with Goda and prepare breakfast. Goda was such a perfectionist that he'd probably already woken up and was probably already preparing a breakfast as exquisite and elegant as glasswork. They reached the overhang by the entrance to the mansion and folded up their umbrellas. Genji took a bundle of several keys from his pocket and unlocked the front door. The Ushiromiya family mansion was the only thing on Rokunjima, so in the past, they hadn't been in the habit of locking up. However, Natsui had ordered that the mansion be locked up from midnight to early morning. Ever since then, unlocking the door in the early morning had become part of the servants' morning shift. This task had been given to Genji and Kanon, so that Goda could start preparing breakfast as soon as he woke up. Silence had fallen in the mansion, giving the impression that the mansion itself was still asleep.
では、朝の仕事を始めよう。
はい。
The two of them split up and began opening the curtains throughout the mansion. If the curtains stayed closed, the mansion would remain enveloped in faint darkness, as though it was still trapped in the previous night. Following a well-rehearsed procedure, Kanon went around the mansion, opening the curtains for one window after another, without having to retrace his steps once. Even with this horrible weather drawing... I didn't see the comma. Drawing the curtains made it feel just a little bit like morning. While doing that, he passed in front of the kitchen. Even though he hadn't smelled anything yet, his stomach started aching for some of Goda's prized cooking.
おはようございます。
He tried to greet Goda, who should have been getting breakfast ready, but Goda was nowhere to be seen. He's dead, isn't he? The kitchen was darkly lit, and not only were the curtains open, the fan wasn't even running. It was still cold, without any trace of a fire being lit, so of course there were no signs of breakfast being made either. Though it would have been inexcusable, perhaps Goda had overslept. Even servants are only human. They sometimes sleep in and show up late. And they're rare. Okay, damn it. I need to stop constantly glancing at the chat while I'm trying to read it. Damn it. Because I'm not trying to read two things at once and my brain overloads. But in the rare case that such a thing happens, it's part of a servant's code to hide the unsightly scene before anybody notices. You know, I can let the anybody slide, but it won't let me let it slide. Just smoothly cover it up. Smoothly cover it up. And make sure the family never even realizes that anything has gone wrong. Kanon took the receiver of the phone that had been fitted to the wall and dialed the number for the extension line in the servant's sleeping room. Oh, fuck. Man died as he lived doing crossword puzzles. Death. Just, Your Honor, crossword puzzles. Death. He couldn't hear that characteristic sound of a dial tone. Kanon tried picking up the receiver again, but even so, he couldn't hear the usual dial tone. He tried dialing again, but it had no apparent effect. Could the lightning last night have damaged some machine breaking the extension line? The equipment in this mansion was all worn out. Kanon fully understood that even the smallest thing could have caused it to break down. He gave up trying to wake Goda with the phone and dashed over to the servant's sleeping room. How long has it been since I stopped sleeping and started lazily staring up at the ceiling? That vague sense of awakening was part of Natsuhi's usual morning experience. She always slept lightly, and she couldn't sleep at all without medicine. To Natsui, sleep was definitely not a happy thing. When she looked outside, she saw that it was still pouring. If she hadn't sensed a tiny amount of light, she might have mistakenly thought it was still the previous night. She herself was one of the hosts, so she mustn't wake up later than her guest. Urging herself on, she raised up her body, which still hadn't completely recovered from yesterday's weariness. No one would torment her as long as she remained inside this room. And her headache wouldn't get any worse here. This room was the only place she could find peace. So when she left, it meant returning to the world where her husband's siblings kept trying to stab each other in the back. In that case, wouldn't it be better to just stay locked up in this room forever? That ridiculous notion brought a bitter smile to Natsui's face. She was starting to sound like Kenzo. Though she often complained about Kenzo staying locked up in his own room and refusing to attend to everyone else, the truth was that she longed to do the same. Like Otter, hi Key. I don't like Natsui, but I can kind of agree she's been a mood for me this whole game. Somewhat. Like, outside of wanting Jessica to do, like, absolutely super good in school, outside of that, I just kind of sit there like, damn. I've felt that before. I've felt, man, I'm not being attacked in my room. Leaves room, I'm being attacked. Natsui gave her head a small shake, and her fantasy was replaced by the reawakening of her usual headache. I've also felt that before. When she reached for the doorknob, trying to leave the room, her hand touched the scorpion charm that she had hung from it before she slept. You know the sentence still works. Before she slept the previous night. It was Maria's charm, which Natsui had received from Jessica. Didn't Jessica say something about it having the power to repel magic, telling her to hang it from her doorknob? Maybe it was thanks to the charm that at least this room had been protected from the malice of her husband's siblings. As she thought this, her mood began to get a little more cheerful. Then Natsui remembered. That's right. Last night, I promised Jessica that I'd give her a charm of my own in exchange for this one, didn't I? Natsui opened a drawer on her dresser and took out an antique accessory case that she had treasured when she was a child. Inside, there were many small objects that Natsui had thought were valuable at the time. From amidst those, she pulled out a red pouch. Inside was a small round my brain read mirror about 10 centimeters across. It looked quite old, but the design on the back of the mirror was very ornate, and it felt like something with historical value. At the very least, it seemed much more authentic than the other charm, which looked like a plastic scorpion keychain. She had heard that this was a spiritual mirror for warding off evil spirits, and she had been given it specially by her grandmother when her grandfather's mementos had been distributed. It had been believed since long ago that a strange power resided in this mirror. Perhaps people thought it could reflect calamity and malice in the same way it reflected light. Natsui returned the mirror to its pouch. Damn it. It would probably be a fitting object to hand over to Jessica. Just Natsui was placing it in her pocket, the sound of someone knocking on the door suddenly echoed through the room.
はい。
おはようございます、奥様。源氏でございます。早朝から申し訳ございません。
今行きます。何事ですか？
No servant had ever come to her this early in the morning, nor had they come to wake her in person. Perhaps something bad had happened. Maybe some fatal oversight had been made while preparing breakfast, something that would shame the household in front of their guests. Natsui took a deep breath in anticipation for whatever trouble she was about to hear of. When she opened the door, Genji once again gave a morning greeting while bowing deeply. Natsui tentatively responded.
おはようございます。何かありましたか？
申し訳ございません。昨夜の落雷で電話機器に故障が出たようです。内線電話が普通になっておりますもので、直接のお伺いになってしまったことをお許しください。
内線電話が普通？それは面倒になりましたね。修理は可能ですか？
残念ながら故障箇所が分かりません。後で業者を呼んで修理させたいと思います。
ということは、この台風が過ぎるまでは修理不能ということですか？つまり客人たちの滞在中はずっと普通ということですね。客人たちのお世話に支障は？
出ないよう最善を尽くします。
結構です。粗相のないようよろしく頼みます。
Natsui let out a small sigh of relief. She had been prepared for the worst, but damage to the telephones wasn't the kind of trouble she was worried about. Then again, even this would probably be enough to spark sarcasm from Ava. Natsui gave her head a light shake.
朝食の準備は順調ですか？
それがゴーダの姿が。
He's gone. That nigga's dead. We haven't been able to find him. Well, ghost literally demoned away.
朝食の支度もまだ行われておらず。
He's like, where'd that nigga go? He gone. What do you mean he gone? He gone.
なんですって？
How many more coincidences are gonna happen before they realize fuckery is happening? I mean, hi Kiyotter, I don't know. Cause I remember, now I'm starting to remember, cause last time I streamed this, they had that whole argument about the gold, and then Kraus found out the gold was real, meaning the witch was real. So high key, everyone should have backdashed out of that situation, but I think, yeah, Kraus only told Natsui because, you know, he doesn't think, or like he assumes, you know, his own wife wouldn't betray him and like rat him out, or what he found out to the others. So technically, only entirely Kraus and Natsui would realize the fuckery like the quickest. Everyone else it would take time, because there was the thing with Maria too, which I'm just now remembering. So I think at this point, only really Natsui and Kraus would be the ones to realize that the weird shit's happening entirely. Again, this is just me and my very, very jank memory. Natsui was indignant. To her, this was a much bigger problem than the phones not working. And despite that, this piece of information was the part that had been postponed. Why did everything go well most of the time, and then come to something like this when relatives were visiting? Natsui put her hand to her forehead and shook her head.
大方朝寝坊でもしているのでしょう。とにかく誰でもいいから急いで朝食の準備を。
Natsui exited into the hall and turned around for a second to close the door to her room. The creepy thing she saw there silenced her completely. It was an unpleasant sight, as though someone had dipped their fingers in a reddish-black liquid and scratched at the door around the doorknob. It was probably some sort of awful prank, arranged by some person who wanted to make it look as though they tried to force the door with bloody hands. That nigga's gone. Just kind of reaffirms he's gone. He was probably like, help! And then he gets dragged off.
私も今ここにお伺いして初めて気づきました。後ほど清掃いたします。
Like, nah, that's Goda's blood. It has to be.
大方、趣味の悪い客人の冗談でしょう。不愉快です。実に不愉快です。
Who in the world would pull such a childish and disgusting prank? Natsui had a pretty good idea, but of course there was no proof. Even if she pushed the issue, it would just seem as though she was making a fuss about nothing. In fact, it would surely be better to act as though she hadn't even realized that such a prank had been played on her. Natsui gave the order to have it cleaned and headed off to the parlor with the squeak of her heels. When Natsui and Genji arrived in the parlor, Eva and Hideyoshi were already there.
おはようございます、皆さん。
おはよう、夏日さん。朝食も合田さんが作るっちゅう話やないか。朝から胃袋が大喜びで騒ぎっぱなしなんや。
本家の楽しみは食事くらいがせいぜいですものね。
エヴァさんも朝からご機嫌がよろしいようで何よりです。
With a weary expression, Natsui returned Eva's gaze, which was fiercely competitive despite the early hour. Then Kanon jogged in. After bowing an apology to the relatives for running inside the mansion, he noticed Genji and told him something in a small voice.
カノン、ゴーダはまだ見つからないのですか？
申し訳ございません、奥様。
Gone!
お屋敷内もゲストハウスも回ったのですが、まだ。
一体どこへ行ったというのです？とりあえず今はゴーダより朝食の準備が先決です。
Like, you know what would be fucked up? If they find, like, more traces of blood, but no body. Because that means not only was he brutally murdered, he just kind of gets wiped from existence physically. Just...
至急対応しなさい。
just the body gone. There's blood everywhere. Where's the body? Gone. Didn't matter.
はい。
He's over there, up there, and a little to the left. Kanon glanced at Genji. It seemed he had something else to report, but was uncertain whether or not the word should come from him. Genji nodded and decided to give the report himself.
奥様、ゴーダだけではありません。旦那様の姿もありません。
Aw, shit.
主人が？
はい。 奥様より先に旦那様に朝食の準備がないことをご報告しようと
Kraus got clapped
印象
too?
をお伺いしたのですが、お姿がありませんでした。
Did Beatrice just scoop them both?
それから旦那様だけではありません。ルドルフ様ご夫妻とローザ様のお姿もありません。
ゲストハウスにも屋敷にもですか？
はい。ゲストハウスの部屋にもおられません。
So they all got scooped. Just, I don't even know if to fully say dead at that point. All I know is they've been scooped. That is the best way I can phrase that. No, I refuse to say it, as they've been kidnapped. When she heard that Goda alone was missing, she assumed he had slept in or was loafing around somewhere. However, now that she learned that several of the relatives were also nowhere to be seen, she began to take a slightly more optimistic view. Could last night's family conference have continued all night up until the present moment? If so, they might have wanted to cool their heads before being shut in a stuffy room, going out for walks on their own through the rain. The part about cooling their heads really sounded like something Kraus would say. Goda had probably been summoned to accompany them and aid them in some way. Goda was not a man who lost track of time. He had to understand that preparations for breakfast would be hindered if he didn't return. However, maybe the family conference had continued until this very moment, with an atmosphere that would make it hard for anyone to slip out. Yes, that theory would be quite convincing for Natsue. She remembered the illusion she'd felt that morning, as though the previous night had never ended. When she learned that the feeling wasn't just an illusion, she once again took a deep, weary breath. After all, that banquet of filthy vultures circling Kenzo's property was still going on.
大方、庭園のどこか、あるいは海岸の方で相も変わらず遺産の話を繰り返しているのでしょう。とにかくゴーダを呼び戻さなくてはいつまでも朝食の準備が整いません。
ってことはなんや、兄さんたちの話し合いはまだ続いとるのか。
She had planned to say it in a small voice, but Hideyoshi overheard Natsui and managed to grasp the situation.
兄さんもルドルフもタフね。ローザの場合は若さかしら。私たち夕べの24時過ぎにはもう眠くてベッドに戻らせてもらったんだけど、確かにあの時点でもまだ兄さんたちは熱論を交わしてたわ。男って熱くなると嫌ね。
Natsui snorted, her face still blank.
カノ、表を探してらっしゃい。ゴーダを見つけたらすぐに戻って朝食の準備をするよう伝えなさい。
かしこまりました。
夏日姉さん、表とは限らないわよ。お父様の書斎ってことはないかしら。
Hideyoshi, I'm right fucking here.
なるほど、考えられん話やないで。
I'm still hung up on the. I'm still hung up on that one, on that whole bit where they were still arguing, and it says like, and it goes like, basically, more than ever, they really need that money right now. And I remember laughing, but being so fucking mad because I had to read that entire argument and then have to read that follow-up 3 times in a row. So basically, more than anything else, they all needed the money right now.
どういう話の流れかはわからんが、お父さんの主催に場所を移してお父さんにも混じってもらって議論を続けてるっちゅう可能性は十分あるやろ。
そのような汚らわしい話題を好んでお父様が書斎へ招き入れることなど考えられません。
あらそう。じゃあ仕方ないわね。
There was nothing we can do.
源氏さんとカノン君は申し訳ないけど外を探してきてちょうだい。確かに兄さんなら頭を冷やすために外を散歩しようなんて言い出しても不思議はないわ。たとえこんな天気でもね。私はお父様の書斎に行ってくるわ。ひょっとするとそこにいるかもしれないしね。
客人であるエヴァさんにそこまでのご足労はおかけできません。私が行ってきます。朝のご挨拶も兼ねて。
あら、じゃあお願いするわね。
Hey Genji, mind risking your life?
でも朝の挨拶を交わしてくれるかは疑わしい
You
わ
know,
ね。
Haiji, that's where I expected it to go.
夏日姉さんってお父様とは仲よろしかったかしら。
Just, I'm not gonna make you do it. Genji, you do it. Genji just like, damn, understandable.
仲が良いかは分かりかねますが、後ろ宮家の跡継ぎの妻を許されるだけの信頼を得ていると確信しています。
ならきっと返事くらいはしてくれるわね。お父様とは朝食くらいご一緒したいの。ぜひ降りてきてくださるよう説得してくれないかしら。私たちはすっかり嫌われちゃってるみたいだけど、そこまで信頼を得ている夏日姉さんの言うことなら聞いてくれそうですもの。そこまで短歌を切ってお父様を説得できず一人で降りてきちゃったりしたら、信頼を得ているなんて二度と言えないかもね。
自信はありませんが努力はします。
Natsui responded, looking discouraged. However, knowing Kinzo's temperament, she had absolutely no confidence in her ability to bring him out. Also, let me set up my phone to charge again because it's being a bitch. Like every day. You gotta just... There we go. Oh, god damn it. Good. Natsui responded, oh, I already read this. Yu was clearly mocking her, confident that Natsui wouldn't be able to get Kenzo to come down. But even so, Natsui would lose face if she gave up, saying it was impossible and letting Eva go instead. Eva's mean-spirited and unreasonable demand made Natsui clench her fists slightly. When Genji realized this, he softly spoke to her over her shoulder.
奥様、よろしければこれをお持ちください。
それは
Genji handed Natsui a sparkling gold key of ornate design. It was the key to Kinzo's study. The study had an auto lock and couldn't be unlocked as long as Kinzo forbade entrance. However, since Genji was especially trusted by Kenzo, he was allowed to carry a key to that door.
でもこの鍵を使ったらあなたも咎めを受けるのではありませんか。
親方様は深くお休みになられている時、扉を叩くくらいではお耳に届かないこともございます。それに親方様にお部屋を出ていただくよう説得するには扉越しでは難しゅうございましょう。ぜひお使いください。
源氏。
Until now, Natsui had thought of Genji as a cold servant who wouldn't do anything for her, since he worked directly under Kenzo. But it looked like she would have to alter her understanding of him. She wanted to communicate her gratitude, but by then, Genji had already turned his back on her and was walking down the corridor with Kano. But as Natsui watched them go, the words directed at her from behind were sneering.
じゃあお父様を必ず連れてきてね。息子のかわいい嫁の言うことですもの。きっと聞いてくれるわよ。私たちは客人だからここでのんびりくつろがせてもらうわ。
予算買えば口が過ぎるで。すまんが夏日姉さん、お父さんのことをよろしく頼むわ。
Without answering, Natsui forcefully spun around on her heels and quickly left that place. Please make Kenzo get fresh air. Please, I'm begging. It's been 20 years. After all that excitement of the previous night, there was no way anyone was going to wake up early. George, Aniki, Jessica, and I were snoring loudly on the beds in the cousins' room. But Maria, who had gone straight to bed without joining in, was completely awake. As she rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked around, she was met with the loud snoring of the 3 other cousins. For a while, Maria had to think about what had happened. After that, she realized her mother wasn't with her and she quickly got lonely. Maria left the cousins' room, trying to head to the room that had been arranged for her and her mother. Paying no heed to the 3 who were sleeping soundly, she slammed the door shut. In response, Battler mumbled and rolled over in his sleep, but it wasn't enough to wake him. After a while, Maria returned, once again opening a door with a lively bang. When she had left the room, her face had been sleepy, but now that she was back, she looked irritated. Her default makes her look at empty as well. Can't say it doesn't. After that, she climbed up on Battler's bed, which happened to be the closest, and started yelling and jumping on it like it was a trampoline. After making sure I was awake, Maria moved over to George Aniki's bed and started jumping on that too. In that manner, the 3 of us were all greeted by an extremely pleasant awakening.
ありがとう、マリアちゃん。起こしてくれたんだね。僕たちは夕べが遅かったから寝坊しちゃったのを起こしてくれたんだね。でももう少しだけ起こし方を優しくしてくれると完璧だったかな。
ジョージ兄さんは本当に大人だよ。 尊敬するぜ。
もうすぐ7時なんだな。まあ確かにもう起きてもいい頃だぜ。
Intruder alert sound deal.
ローザおばさんが部屋にいなかったの？もう起きてお屋敷の方に行っちゃったのかな。
Maria kept groaning ooh and looking unhappy. She didn't exactly seem lonely because her mother wasn't around. It was more like irritated and thrown off balance because her mother wasn't where she'd expected. If we could just tell her where her mother was, that alone would probably calm her down. But unfortunately, we had no way of knowing where Aunt Rosa was, except that she wasn't here.
どうせ朝食に行くことになるんだし、屋敷の方に行こうぜ。
そうだな。マリア、一緒に屋敷へ行こうぜ。きっとローザおばさんもそこさ。
ママはお屋敷なら行く。
そうだね。お屋敷に行こうか。多分親たちはもう向こうに行ってるんだよ。
Maria regained her usual composure so completely. Her earlier tantrum now seemed like a lie. We got dressed, left the room, and headed for the mansion. Hey, Spiral. Once more there was a knocking sound on the study door, but there was no answer. He seemed to be sleeping still, and I could not wake him. I'm getting ribs, so I'm making people. If she went back downstairs and said something like that, Eva would probably be amused and triumphant. And even putting Eva aside, it was problematic that Kenzo had stayed shut away during this entire once-a-year conference, not even coming down to greet anyone. Even the family head, no, especially the family head, couldn't fail to make an appearance. I wonder if I can convince him myself. Natsui readied herself and used the key that she'd borrowed from Genji to open the door. Even though she was prepared for the sweet stench which seemed to eat into one's brain as it poured out the small crack at the door, she couldn't help but grimace. And actually doing some work on my story that I've been working on. Thinking that she might still be sleeping, Natsui entered the room quietly. It's just Beatrice in there smoking a blunt. It's the greatest mix-up. Beatrice was just a stoner the whole time. When she did, Kenzo was already awake and looking down out of the window.
お目覚めでしたか。おはようございます。
どうやって入ったのか。
Kenzo spoke with his back still facing her. His voice was not harsh, but calm, and Natsui was slightly reassured. However, though he was awake, he wouldn't have ignored all that knocking if he was in a good mood. Natsui wasn't able to relax.
申し訳ございませんでした。源氏さんにお願いして書斎の鍵をお借りさせていただきました。
ほう、元気がか。我が友がそれに足ると思ったならば話を聞かぬわけにもいくまい。して、私に何言おうか。
はい。もうじき朝食の準備が整いますが、ぜひお父様にもおいでいただきたく思いまして。
朝食はここでとる。いつものように運ばせるがいい。
I was high-key expecting to just look at her once and go, "Bitch, no," and then just close the door. She doesn't even leave the room, he just closes the door. Just, why'd you close the door? I'm still here. Fuck.
しかしお父様、年に一度の親族会議です。せめてお顔をお見せになってください。
下に降りて私の死後遺産をどのように食いちぎるのかを決める議論に加われというのか。バカらしい。そのような話は私を抜きで好きに進めるがいい。そしてそれが親族会議だというなら、私がこの部屋を出るほどの価値はない。私は忙しいのだ。構うでない。
Says bitch no, closes the door, walks away playing Linkin Park in 1986. Finally. On his phone, yes. These jokes get better and worse when these jokes get better and worse when games have confirmed time periods, because it just makes it better. Because bro, it's the 1700s. Where would he even get a listen? Power move. Nah, he has a whole. You're right, Otter. Whole ass Walkman. His words carried the threat that any further questions would not be appreciated. I don't give a Natsui realized that adding any further pleas would finally bring his wrath down upon her. She didn't look forward to facing Eva's sarcasm, but there was nothing more she could do.
そうですか。わかりました。みんな残念がるでしょうが、そう伝えます。
Natsui decided to give up. Bowing silently, she tried to leave the room before Kenzo's spasmodic temper could flare up. As she did, Kenzo spoke to her. His voice was so calm and gentle, it felt like it came from an entirely different person.
夏日、後ろ宮の家に嫁ぎ、もう随分になるな。
はい。後宮を名乗ることを許されてからもう随分になります。
前の家が恋しくなることもあるか。
いいえ、嫁ぐとは成果を捨てることです。私は後宮夏日、帰る家も懐かしむ家も全てはこの後宮の家のみです。
She truly wasn't exaggerating. Such was the resolve she felt whenever she applied the Ushiramiya family name to herself. And that's precisely why she was so saddened when her husband didn't treat her like an Ushiramiya, leaving her to race about in vain.
クラウスが女で、お前がその夫であったなら、 いや、それは言うまい。
それはどういう意味ですか、お父様。
Natsui was shocked. If Kinzo's words just now were what they seemed, it would have been more than enough to make up for all she'd suffered up to that point.
忘れよ。年寄りのざれ言だ。
Kenzo once again faced away from her. He told her to forget it, but Natsui couldn't help feeling a warmth in her heart.
お父様、この夏日は血はつながらずともお父様の娘です。後宮家の名誉も栄光も、そしてお父様が残されたものも全て、この夏日が必ずや守ってみせますから。
お前に片翼のわしをまとう資格はない。しかしお前の心には確かに片翼のわしが刻まれている。ならばお前は間違いなく我が血族で後宮家の栄光を引き継ぐ者だ。お前の衣服にわしがないことを嘲笑う者もいよう。しかしそれに耳を貸すことはない。心にわしを持つ者だけが真の私の血族なのだ。お前を後宮家に迎えられたことを今は光栄に思っている。
Without saying anything more, Kinzo remained with his back to Natsui. However, Natsui couldn't help but feel something warm well up inside her that she hadn't felt since long ago, when she had just been a child. Natsui bowed silently to his back and left the room.
あら、ちょうどいいタイミングだったわね。お父様の様子はどう？あんまり遅いから様子を見に来ちゃったのよ。
When Natsui left the study, she saw Eva climbing the stairs and their eyes met. Eva was smirking unpleasantly, thinking that Natsui would leave drudgingly after failing to convince Kinzo. However, the way Natsui was now, such a frivolous laugh wouldn't disturb her. She was not permitted to wear the family crest on her clothing, but she was permitted to wear it in her heart. So she spoke calmly and confidently, with the dignity of the one who would protect the Ushiramiya family's glory.
お父様は親族会議にはおいでにならないそうです。汚らわしい議題に関心はないと仰せです。
とかなんとか言っちゃって。お父様を説得できなかったんなら素直にそう言えばいいじゃない。
哀れですね。お父様が嘆かれるお気持ちも分かろうというものです。
それはどういう意味よ。
Natsui did not answer. Just as Kenzo had done earlier, she showed Eva her back as she headed down the stairs. Eva finally realized that she was being made fun of, that something had happened to quickly bolster Natsui's confidence. Even so, she apparently didn't have the courage to risk Kinzo's wrath. Unable to even knock on the door, she could only click her tongue, make a motion as though scratching at it, and follow after Natsui.
それで兄さんたちはいたの？お父様に聞いたの？
聞きそびれましたが、書斎の中にはいませんでした。お父様が夫たちの下船な話のために入室を許すこともありえませんから、行き先を知ることもないでしょう。下に降りて使用人たちが探してくれるのを待ちましょう。朝食は遅れますが、お茶でもいかがです、エヴァさん。
別に結構よ。
Eva couldn't hide her confusion at the complete difference in Natsui's attitude. She got a +5 in confidence, then all of a sudden, you can't react. She was acting so boldly, and while Eva hated to admit it, she even had a sense of dignity about her. Unable to find fault with anything, Eva could only follow Natsui back to the parlor. She really got that confidence boost, and then Eva's like, oh fuck, I can't defeat that. I can't DPS that. It's too strong. When the two of them returned to the parlor, Hideyoshi had been joined by the 4 children and Nanjo. Sit down, be humble. Genji, who had been talking with Hideyoshi, reported the current situation when he noticed that Natsui returned.
主人たちはまだ見つからないのですか?
はい、申し訳ございません。あと、熊沢が朝食の準備に入りました。もう少し時間をいただきたいとのことです。
The clock read a little past 8. I'm gonna get some fucking Raising Canes? Full diabetes. That is, Spiral, those are sentences I did not expect to read, but you know what? I'm fine with it. Normally, going over that time would be a disgrace to the host.
今、カノンが表を探しています。
Oh, chicken. Okay, I get it.
それから、シャノンの姿も見えません。
シャノンまで? まったく、主人は何を従えて散歩に出かけたのですか?
Wait, I can move this back now because no one's in the bathroom. Just how many people had gone missing by now? Now that the number was this large, it was starting to feel truly unpleasant, as though the people here were the only ones being left out of something interesting. At least that seemed to reflect the feelings of the children and Maria in particular. She was indignant, her stomach grumbling, almost as though her mother and the others had left her alone to go off and eat something delicious without her. The other children were flipping through the channels on the television, trying to find a program that might interest Maria and cheer her up again. Nanjo was sitting on the sofa, gazing blissfully at the children while reading a book. It must have been a book about chess. The sound of footsteps came rushing towards them with a pitter-patter. There was only one set, so they realized before seeing who it belonged to that it was probably Kanon, not Kraus and the rest.
奥様、失礼します。
その様子では見つけられなかったようですね。
申し訳ございません。まだ。
もう十分です。ご苦労をかけました。
She didn't know where they were, but they had to be somewhere on this island. They hadn't had a thing to eat since the previous night, so their stomachs must be growling about now. They'd probably come plodding back of their own accord before long. By now, Natsui was thoroughly exasperated and started to feel that there was no reason for them to go out of their way in search.
私はお客様方にお茶のご用意をしに厨房へ行きます。二人とも早朝からご苦労様でした。
Natsui left the parlor, acting as though the release in tension had caused a new surge in her brain headache. Kanon tried to call her back, but Natsui left swiftly.
どうした？まだ何かあるのか？
はい。旦那様方のお姿を見つけることはできませんでしたが、その
Kanon sounded evasive. It looked as though he didn't know where they were, but had spotted something that might be connected to their disappearance. Eva and Hideyoshi noticed this exchange of words and came over. They probably picked up on something strange in Kanon's behavior.
どうしたんや、カノン君。クラウス兄さんたちは見つかったんか？
実はバラ庭園の倉庫の様子がおかしいのです。
様子がおかしいというのはどういう意味だ？
それがその何と説明すればいいのか。
Kanon hesitated once more. His tone wasn't at all what you expect from this usually fearless boy. Seeing this, Eva and Hideyoshi looked at each other dubiously.
どういうこと？倉庫の中に兄さんたちがいたんじゃないの？
いえ、中はこれから調べます。
I saw this woman in a black dress snorting cocaine. Why do I like how it's not even me anymore? It's just you running it. I mean, to be fair, I still find it funny on her. It's just that it's funny because I've given up on the joke. So to me, I'm just sitting here like, it would be funny if she was introduced that way.
その鍵を取りに戻ったところなのですが、その
ようわからんが、とにかく中を調べればいいだけの話じゃないか。その倉庫の鍵はどこにあるんや？
使用人室にあります。すぐに中を確かめましょう。
Kanon dashed off to the servant room and returned with the key. Genji left the parlor, saying that he would go check, but then Eva and Hideyoshi followed after him. What was this something strange about the storehouse that had caused the usually fearless Kanon to hesitate? It was still pouring outside, but perhaps their curiosity over something that Kanon couldn't talk about won out. When the children made a big fuss watching television, Kanon and the rest dashed over to the entrance. The Rose Garden storehouse was a place that housed various tools used to manage the garden. It was definitely not a pretty building. Because of its appearance, it had been built so that it was hidden in a corner of the Rose Garden. Kanon, Genji, Eva, and Hideyoshi came cutting across the Rose Garden holding umbrellas. They entered a small path just off the Rose Garden, which was normally off limits for those appreciating the garden and only used by those maintaining it. Spiral, what happened? As they dashed down the storehouse came into view in front of them. It was quite an old shed, and compared to this flawlessly perfect beauty of the Rose Garden, it was pretty seedy looking. Oh, Jameson Price is having a class. Just got paid last Friday and spent. Should I do it? Should I do it and just script? Like Sparrow, that's on you. I don't have room to say. Like I can't really say do it or don't. I'm just kind of in the mood of, I mean, if you feel like it. But if there's like other stuff you need to do first, then it's probably better to not. It's all I can really say. So you just don't understand why it had been built in a hard-to-seize place. Eva and Hideyoshi arrived. Eva and Hideyoshi arrived at the storehouse long after Kanon and Genji.
カノン君たちは早いな。わしは心臓が爆発しそうや。
こんなところに倉庫なんか建ててたのね。何よそれ。
Oh shit. When Eva looked where Kanon was pointing, she was at a loss for words. Noticing this, Hideyoshi also followed Kanon's finger and was likewise too shocked to speak. The entrance to the storehouse was a kind of shutter, and there, everyone suddenly realized why Kanon had been able to find words to describe what they now saw. On the shutter, which was completely filthy from being exposed to wind and rain for so long, stuck right on it, there was something that looked like a strange, dark red liquid? Mucus? Maybe it was some sticky paint. An indescribably eerie shape was drawn on the shutter with some kind of ghastly substance. The rain had caused it to drip down like fresh blood leaking from an open wound. No more beating around the bush. Some kind of mark was drawn here, with a ghastly substance that looked like blood, in a shape that seemed to suggest something ominous. 2 circles were drawn there, and inside them was a design that looked like a cross. 4 ends of the cross were widely exaggerated, and it looked like some kind of crest from somewhere around Europe. And in the cracks between the shapes were written closely packed together, were some unfamiliar characters or possibly symbols.
なんちゅう悪趣味な落書きや。これあれか。悪魔の儀式とかの魔法陣いうやつとちゃうか。
It wasn't surprising that Hideyoshi would say that about such a ghastly shape drawn in a deep red dripping substance.
これいつ書かれたの？
昨日雨が降り出す前にここに来ましたが、その時には何も書かれてませんでした。
他の方々の目に触れる前に何とかしよう。ご覧になられたらご不快になられるだろう。
そうね。ただの倉庫小屋とはいえ、こんな気持ち悪い落書きを1秒たりとも放置したくないわ。
倉庫の中に塗料もあります。応急処置でとりあえず塗り消して、後日天気のいい日に改めて塗装しましょう。
Genji remembered that he had just recently seen another scribble, and that it too had been made with a strange dark red substance of the same color as this. That must have been... That's right. He had seen it on the door to Natsui's room. This game is really good at space. Yeah.
カノン君、さっさとこの落書きを消して戻りましょう。 たとえそうことはいえ、実家の落書きは本当に腹立たしいわ。
はい、すぐに済ませますので。
Conan squatted in front of the shutter and unlocked it. He then lifted it up with all of his strength. A boisterous noise resounded, and the eerie shape drawn on the shutter began to get sucked in through the top of the as the shutter was raised. At least for the time being, that ominous drawing disappeared from their direct gaze, and they breathed a sigh of relief. Thanks to a kids program they came across, Maria was feeling much better. Battler and Jessica were poking fun at the kids' show at every turn, cackling together. George was enjoying the program with Maria from her perspective. Nanjo sat on a sofa, passing the time by reading quietly. They heard hurried footsteps coming from the hallway. They were the footsteps of a single Oh shit. Did that mean it wasn't the group of 4 that had just left? It was Genji. It was very rare for Genji, who considered being out of breath a violation of a servant's virtues, to be gasping for air. He had probably come dashing back from outside the mansion. His shoulders were soaking wet, and he didn't have his usual trim appearance. When Genji noticed Nanjo looking at him, he gave a small silent bow and quickly approached him.
Nanjo sensei, 申し訳ございません。至急お越しください。何事ですかな?
As Genji whispered something into Nanjo's ear, Nanjo went pale. He rose from the sofa, trying not to be noticed by the children who were still engrossed by the TV. And the two of them rapidly left the parlor, muffling their footsteps. Just as they were about to exit the parlor, they came across Natsui, who was pushing a serving cart loaded with a tea set. Genji whispered something into Natsui's ear, and Natsui went pale too in apparent shock. Then, leaving the serving cart where it was, the 3 of them dashed towards the entrance. George noticed them running down the rose garden through the window.
なんだろう。源氏さんと南條先生と、あれは夏日おばさんかな。
どうしたんだよ、兄貴。
何かあったのかな。ひどい慌てようだったね。
When Jessica and Maruva saw that Eva, Hideyoshi, and Nanjo were no longer in their seats and the serving cart had been abandoned in the entrance of the parlor, they also realized something was the matter.
何か事故でもあったとか?
行ってみようぜ。俺たちだけのけ者なんて面白くねえしな。
For some reason, what Badler said sounded extremely indiscreet, but they couldn't deny that they were just a little insecure and concerned after seeing their adults run off into the rain without regards to their appearance.
行ってみようぜ。何があったか気になるぜ。
Jessica's uneasy words spoke for all of them.
おい、マリア、お前も来るか。それともテレビを見てるか。
マリアはテレビがいい。
Heike the child had it right. Wait.
僕たちだけで行こう。
Just, y'all are good. I'm just gonna sit here.
マリアちゃん、すぐ戻るからね。テレビを見て待ってるんだよ。
Like, everyone's getting scooped. By the time the kids made it outside, the adults were no longer in sight, but Jessica seemed to have a pretty good idea where they'd gone, judging by the direction they'd been running. Following Jessica, we ran through this rain-soaked rose garden. The wind seemed to suddenly get stronger. The malicious sound of thunder began to ring out like it had the previous night. Got another letter. It felt like an eerie something had surrounded the island and was trying to stop us from moving forward.
Jessica, この先には何があるんだ?
確か園芸道具なんかの倉庫があったはずだぜ。
そんなところに一体何があるんだろうね。
Just as Jessica had said, they began to see a storehouse in front of them. They could also see the adults there. The shutter to the storehouse was open, and several adults looked as though they were searching for something. For some reason, only Natsui was outside the storehouse, without even holding an umbrella. She looked like she was hanging her head back, and her back was facing them. There was Genji, Nanjo, and Natsui, who had just left the mansion. The ones who had left earlier, Kanon, Hiva, and Hideyoshi, were also there, making for a small crowd of people. But there was absolutely no bustle of activity. When Natsui realized that the children were approaching, a terrible expression rose to her face, and she ran at them with her arms spread wide. But despite that, no. Because of that, the kids saw the seed Natsui was trying to keep them away from. Inside the storehouse, with its shutter wide open, a faint fluorescent light shone down. And right there was dead bodies bedding. Jessica's piercing shriek rang out. But that was just because Jessica's scream was the loudest. The same thing spilled out of Battler and George's mouths as well. Eva spread her arms just like Natsui, roaring at the kids with a bone-chilling expression on her face. Georgie! A body has been discovered. Damn it. God damn it. When Natsui spread her arms, I thought she was trying to prevent us from advancing any further. But that wasn't why Eva was spreading her arms right now. She was trying to stop us kids from seeing that terrible scene. It was her mother's heart trying to protect the hearts of us children by blocking our view of that terrible scene by at least the width of one of her arms. I'd seen this kind of cheap scene all too often. In manga, TV, anime, and movies, I'd seen it over and over again. This was just seeing something appear in real life that I'd seen plenty of times before in some of those more sensational movies, right? That alone shouldn't. But that suit, it's that old bastard's, isn't it? I get it. That's Uncle Kraus. And Kyrie-san, and Rosa. Yeah. So I was right, they're all fucking dead.
私は町医者だ。検視は専門外だ。ちゅうことは何や。殺しただけじゃ飽き足らず、さらにこんな無体なことをしたい言うんか。悪魔や、悪魔の所業や。
Natsui caught Jessica in her arms, and Aunt Eva caught George Aniki. So I was the only one who could approach the entrance to the storehouse. If only there had been someone there to catch me, too. I wouldn't have needed to have this horrible, evil scene burned into my eyes. No, that's not it. It isn't that there's no one here to catch me. The people who should catch me, they're right here, aren't they? Just as Jessica said, it did look like a storehouse for gardening tools. A lawnmower with extra blades, a grass sickle and a hammer. Some carpentry tools such as a saw. Piled up potted plants and bags of fertilizer. And treated just the same, the corpses of several people had been laid to rest there. No, had been tossed in there. I could tell them by their clothes. That old bastard and Kyrie-san, Uncle Kraus and Aunt Rosa. Beyond that, Goda-san and... Are there still more of them? How many people died? You're fucking kidding me. I couldn't even count them on one hand. Damn it! I didn't know whether it had been one of these gardening tools, which if used for something other than the intended purpose, could definitely be wielded with a naked brutality. Or whether some horrible tool had been brought in here specifically for this. Anyway, each one of the bodies jammed in here had been given an atrocious makeup. It wasn't makeup. It was more like their faces had been plowed. Their faces were smashed, forced into expressions that normal people couldn't even make after death. I couldn't tell where the eyes or the noses were, but I could find their mouths because they were gaping wide, their gums exposed. But their front teeth were missing, and even the cheeks that should have covered all of this were torn up and laid bare. That trendy makeup you always spent so much time on, even though you're a man, isn't doing anything now.
バトラさん、これ以上見てはいかん。こんな姿をお父さんもお母さんもあんたに見せたいわけがない。お父さんとお母さんのためにもこれ以上見てはいかん。
死者ってのは安らかに眠る顔ってやつを拝ませてくれるんじゃねえのかよ。顔がねえんだよ。俺の親父とキリエさんの顔がねえんだよ。どういう顔して死んじまったのか、それすらもわかんねえんだよ。なんだよ俺は。親父たちのことを思い出すときはこのぐちゃぐちゃの化け物みてえな顔をいつも思い出せたのかよ。そいつは最高だぜ。 その親父のニヤニヤとした顔を思い出さなくていいんだからよ。最高だぜ最高だぜ。でもよ、キリエさんの顔くらいはいいだろ。キリエさんの悪党じゃねえ。たまにはムカつくと思ったけどよ、ちょいとかっこいい俺の姉気分だったお人じゃねえかよ。こりゃねえよ、こんなのってねえよ。クロスおじさんなんかまだマシじゃねえか。顔面じゃなくて側面だぜ。少なくとも顔半分は残ってるじゃねえかよ。まだマシだぜ、まだマシだぜ。
Jessica filled her ears with the sound of her own screaming, trying to shut out my reckless words.
よすんだバトラ君、もうよすんだ、もうよすんだ。
兄貴兄貴。
Disregarding age and appearance, I fell to my knees clinging to Aniki's waist and sobbing. It was as if I was crying on behalf of everyone else there. Representing the feelings of everyone there, I screamed over and over.
Otou-san. 倒れているのはクラウスおじさん、ルドルフおじさん、キリエおばさんにローザおばさん、ゴーダさんで5人。
いや6人や。ここにもう一人おる。
The body Hideyoshi was looking down on now happened to be hidden amongst the shadows in that mountain range of objects, in a blind spot to George, who stood by the entrance. So George couldn't tell whose body it was. So George cursed himself. He cursed the fact that his worst guesses always turned out to be right.
じゃあお父さんの足元に倒れているのはシャノンなんだね。
ああ、シャノンちゃんや。
George fell completely silent. He shook slightly, his lower lip trembling. Normally, he would have wanted to run to his beloved's body, screaming and crying. However, before rashly rushing forward, he worked to keep his composure and ask his father.
シャノンもクラウスおじさんたちと同じなのかな。
Hideyoshi deeply understood the meaning of those words, so he couldn't give George an immediate answer. Or rather, he felt that silence was the only sincere and loving response he could give George right now. When George asked if Shannon was the same, he meant to ask whether her corpse was in the same condition as the others or not. Since Hideyoshi hadn't denied it, it meant her corpse was in the same brutal state.
シャノンを見てもいいかな。いや、あかん。どうして？だってもう二度とシャノンの顔を見られないんだよ。その最後の顔、どうして見たらいけないんだよ。
お前が最後にシャノンちゃんに会ったのは昨日か。
うん。
そうか。そのシャノンちゃんは別れ際にお前にどんな顔を見せたんや。
素敵な笑顔だったよ。
After he handed her the ring, she hesitated, even though she must have already made up her mind. Then she looked bashful and ran away because she was embarrassed to let him see her face looking like that. That's the expression that was revived in George's mind.
そうか。ならシャノンちゃんもその笑顔をお前に残したいと願うはずや。
Hideyoshi looked down upon Shannon's body, lying at his feet. Just like the other bodies, it was in such a horrible state that it'd make anyone want to cover their eyes. Her head had been smashed in from the side, and no more than half of her expression remained. If the remaining blood-soaked half of her expression had been wiped clean, would that graceful smile of hers be peeked out? But only half of it. Without thinking, Hideyoshi slapped his hands over his eyes. How brutal. If her face was going to be crushed anyway, then if only all of it had been crushed, he might have been able to temporarily distract George from his pain by making the pathetic suggestion that it was someone else wearing Shannon's clothes. But half of her face had been left untouched. It caused the body so much humiliation, while still proving beyond doubt that the body was Shannon's and nobody else's. How inhuman, how brutish. And there, trying his best to burn the image of the remaining half of Shannon's expression into his eyes as she lay at Hideyoshi's feet, was Kanon. Kanon was not crying. Tears had risen to his eyes, but they did not drip down. But that didn't mean he wasn't feeling as much sadness as everyone else. Losing Shannon, who had lived with him in the same orphanage, whom he had loved as a sister, must have been just the same as losing a blood relative.
ジョージ、シャノンちゃんはきっとありがとう言うてるぞ。お前に恥ずかしいところを見られとうなかったんや。きっとお前が耐えてくれたこと感謝しとるで。
分かってる。分かってるよ、父さん。分かってるよ。
George leaned against the outside wall of the storehouse, crouching down limply.
父さん、頼みがあるんだ。
なんや。
僕 僕の代わりに見てほしいんだ。シャノンは指に指輪をつけてるかな。
指輪？ちょいと見てみる。
Hideyoshi crouched down. As he did, Kanon silently pointed to one of Shannon's hands.
ああ、あるで。こりゃダイヤの指輪や。クズダイヤとちゃう。なかなかの値打ちもんや。
それはどっちの手のどの指にあるのかな。
と左手の薬指や。そっか、シャノンちゃん婚約しとったんか。
ジョージ、あなたまさか。
エヴァ、今はそんなん関係ないで。シャノンちゃんは男に将来を約束されとったんや。一生を幸せにしちゃると男に言わせたんや。それが誰かは問題とちゃうで。男にそこまで言わしめて女の本懐やないか。いつこの指輪をもらったんかは知らん。誰が渡したかも知らん。だがそれでもシャノンちゃんは指輪をもらえたんや。そしてそれを受け入れ左の薬指に通したんや。指輪を送った男もきっと喜んだんとちゃうか。
To most of the people there, Hideyoshi was simply disturbed by this extraordinary situation and was blurting out nonsense. However, someone who knew of George and Shannon's true relationship would understand the full meaning of those words.
そっか、ありがとう父さん。
George stood up. The traces of tears still streaked his face, but his expression had returned to its usual calm one.
行こう。バトラー君、ジェシカちゃん。これ以上僕たちがここにいると大人の邪魔になる。
そうだな。
Jessica sniffled once, showing her face to her mother, who had been holding her the whole time, to let her know she was okay now. When she faced George again, she once again had on her usual expression, although she couldn't smile.
バトラー、しっかり。
Battler kept on crouching in front of his parents' bodies.
すまねえな。がっつり泣いたら落ち着いたぜ。親父の野郎、普段はクソクソ言ってるくせに。ちょっと死んじまったくらいでピーピー泣くんじゃねえぜって笑ってやがれ。仕方ねえだろ。親が死んだら泣くように遺伝子すり込まれちまってたからよ。
Rattler's face was still bright red from the tears, but he had at least recovered enough to fake a smile, if only a bitter one.
カノン、お前もこれ以上ここにいてはいけません。子供たちを連れてお屋敷に戻っていなさい。
Natsui had been standing under the rain this whole time, unable to take a step into the storehouse. Maybe she had her own way of grieving, different from Battler's. Realizing that she had to take on the role of responsibility now that her husband was dead, she gave Kanon those orders.
はい、奥様。
Kanon rose silently and turned to face me. His face was pure white, almost as though his own heart had died along with Shannon, and there was no life in his expression. On an ordinary day, if he had been told to guide the children through the beautiful rose garden, Kanon might have led the way. But now, there was no distinction between Kanon and the children. They were just now a bunch of kids about the same age, suffering the pain of losing those close to them. After making sure that the children were leaving, Natsui started giving orders to Genji.
源氏、すぐに警察に連絡しなさい。台風が通り過ぎるまでは来られないでしょうか。どうすればいいか指示を与えてくれるはずです。
わかりました。防災用の無線機がありますので、それで連絡します。
When she heard that, Natsui remembered. That's right, the phones were out today, weren't they? However, they also had a radio, since they couldn't necessarily rely on phones all the time while living on an isolated island. At any rate, they should start by contacting the police and receiving their instructions. Everything else could wait.
南條先生、もうこの場はどうしようもありませんか。
残念ながら私には何もできませんな。
わかりました。源氏、せめて主人たちの顔を何かで覆ってやることはできませんか。このような姿を晒すこと当人にとっても屈辱的でしょうか。
はい。
Genji picked up several dried up towels from the inside of the storehouse. When Eva stopped him with a shrill voice.
ちょっとちょっと、お待ちなさいよ。ここは犯行現場なんでしょ。なら変に手を加えちゃダメよ。私たちは混乱してて現場に土足で踏み入っちゃったけど、それはきっと警察の捜査の邪魔になったわよ。
Natsui glared at Eva, offended. Objectively speaking, Eva was right. Even so, she glared at Eva as though accusing her of refusing to do those tragic corruptions which had been humiliated even after death, the simple kindness of covering their faces. However, Eva had spoken both calmly and correctly. This horrible situation definitely wasn't an accident. It was a crime. Someone had killed them. It was a murder case. So they needed to be careful to avoid disturbing the site any further. They had to do what little they could to aid the police, preserving clues that might help catch the detestable culprit.
私もエヴァさんに賛成ですな。警察が来るまでここは手をつけずにしておくべきです。
奥様、いかがなさいますか。
そうですね。わかりました。ここを閉ざしなさい。それから念のためここに別の施錠をするように。
別の施錠？
ええ。ここに来た時シャッターの鍵は閉じていました。ということはシャッターの鍵を使い犯人が施錠したということです。
確かに通りや。じゃあここを開けた限り犯人の指紋が残ってるんとちゃうんか。
警察に証拠として提出する価値はあるでしょうけど。 カノン君が普通に持ってここを開けるのに使用しちゃったわ。多分カノン君の指紋も付着しちゃってるわよ。そしてその鍵はさっき源氏さんに手渡され、源氏さんも素手で受け取ってる。大した証拠にはなりそうにないわね。
それは不用心でした。申し訳ございません。
源氏さん、この倉庫の鍵は他にもあるんか？
いいえ、この一つだけです。
ということは犯人はその鍵を使用人室から持ち出し、そして律儀に元の場所に戻したちゅうことになるな。
Hideyoshi's theory sounded plausible. It was actually very strange if you thought about it. Why would they go through all the trouble of returning a key they stole? No, if you think about it even more deeply, there are some points that are even more bizarre. When a criminal hides a body, they're usually trying to delay the point at which it'll be found, so they can use that time to escape. The six weren't necessarily killed here, but it was reasonable to assume that they were killed somewhere on this island, carried to this storehouse, and hidden to delay the discovery of the crime. And yet, the eerie magic circle scribbled on the storehouse shutter had eloquently indicated the location of the hidden corpses. Sure, it didn't explicitly mention the corpses, but 6 people had gone missing. In that situation, someone had made such an obvious piece of graffiti and even returned the key to the shutter, almost as though they wanted the corpses to be discovered.
とにかく一度は犯人が開け閉めをした施錠だけでは信用できません。犯人の手からもこの場所を保護する意味で施錠を新たにしたいと言っているのです。
いい案だと思います。私も賛成です。
Genji fished around inside the storehouse and unsealed a brand new padlock that had been inside a small box.
鍵はどうなさいますか？
私が持ちましょう。責任を持って警察に手渡します。
Natsui took the key to the padlock from Genji's hand. After that, they all exited and lowered the shutter. And so, the corpses were once again sealed behind that shutter, which was still covered with that creepy magic circle. Genji crouched down in front of the shutter to fasten the new padlock. Shutters often have a place in front where you can attach your own lock in addition to the main lock of the shutter. This was one of those types. In the midst of the roar of thunder and the pouring rain, the storehouse stood there, ominously. With its closed shutters still covered in a blood-like, creepy substance, it swallowed up the bodies of the 6. To Natsui, putting a new lock on wasn't mainly to preserve the scene for the police. She might have felt like she wanted to shut that mouth for all eternity. To prevent that eerie beast from swallowing up any more victims.
さあ、行きましょう、皆さん。南條先生、ご足労をありがとうございました。源氏は急いで警察に連絡を。
戻りましたらすぐに連絡します。
The adults left the storehouse. The ghastly magic circle drawn on the shutter kept the 6 bodies in its throat. Looming eerily as the lightning occasionally lit it up. Thanks for coming out to the stream, everybody. I need just let me just. Yeah, like, oh god, the text is line fucking ugly. Let me just. Oh no, that's the. There we go. Did I never like fix how to move this damn thing? Thanks for coming out. See you guys later.